I stayed quiet longer than I should have. Not because I didn't have anything to say, and not because I was trying to be polite. I simply waited. At first it felt intentional, like I was choosing restraint, like I was being thoughtful. I told myself that waiting was a kind of care, that holding back meant I was paying attention, that silence could be a form of respect. But time kept moving, and my silence stayed behind. The moment didn't ask for my words. It didn't pause to check whether I was ready. It continued calmly without noticing the difference. Everything remained intact. The rhythm stayed steady. Nothing signaled that something was missing. And that was when I realized how easy it was for a moment to go on without me. Not because I didn't matter, but because it didn't need to decide either way. It simply kept going. The room stayed the same. People shifted. Someone spoke. Someone else responded. Nothing broke. That was what made it easy to stay quiet. I told myself I was listening. That listening was enough. That not every moment required participation. That presence didn't always need to be visible. And for a while that felt true. The conversation had its own rhythm. Steady and unbothered. Voices rose and fell naturally, as if following a pattern they already knew. But as it moved forward, I realized something subtle had changed. The space no longer expected me. There was no pause left open. No small hesitation where my voice might fit. The shape of the moment had adjusted, closing gently around the people still speaking. Words passed between others, finding their places effortlessly. They didn't slow down. They didn't look for an opening. And I understood then that silence doesn't always feel like absence at first. Sometimes it feels like belonging, right up until the moment. You realize you've been left out of the pattern entirely. I noticed how natural it felt for the moment to exist without me, how quickly my absence became normal. There was no tension, no awkward gap waiting to be filled, no sense that anything was missing. Just a smooth continuation, as if the space had quietly adjusted its shape and settled into something new. I stayed still, nodding at the right moments, reacting just enough to remain visible. I smiled when others smiled. I shifted when the room shifted. I followed the rhythm closely enough that no one had reason to look my way, but inside nothing moved. There was no urgency, no impulse pushing forward, only a quiet awareness that I was present without being involved. I remember thinking that if I spoke now, it would feel out of place. Not wrong, just unnecessary, like adding a sentence after the point had already been made, like interrupting a thought that had already reached its conclusion. So I stayed quiet, longer than I should have. At some point, the silence stopped feeling like a choice. It stopped feeling deliberate or careful. It became a habit, a pause that repeated itself, a delay that kept extending, not because it needed to, but because it no longer questioned itself. And I realized quietly that silence can grow, not by intention, but by comfort, by how easy it is to keep not speaking once the moment no longer expects you to. I wasn't holding back anymore. I was simply late. The moment had already adjusted. It no longer needed my voice to complete itself. And that was the part I didn't expect. Not the silence, but how easily the world learned to move without it. There was no resistance, no sign that anything had been missing. The space had reorganized itself quietly, as if my words had never been part of the design. I stood there realizing that timing matters more than intention, that even the right words, arriving too late, can lose their place. I don't know what would have happened if I had spoken earlier. Maybe nothing would have changed. Maybe everything would have. There's no version of that moment I can return to and test. No alternate ending to compare. All I know is this: some silences are gentle. Some are necessary. They protect the moment. They allow it to breathe. But some last longer than they were ever meant to. They stretch quietly, becoming part of the background, until they're no longer noticed as silence at all, and you don't realize it, until the moment has already passed, until what could have been said has nowhere left to go.